Hello, Iona College. Welcome back to the Sports Vault. I am your host with the most, Jersey Joe. Come with my partner, as always, Big Shot Rob. We just did our NCAA segment, and we're moving into our baseball segment. We've been doing a little preview of every division leading up to the season. Season is going to be here next week, so let's finish it off. We got the AL Central and the NL Central. We're going to tell you everything you need to know about both. Let's start off with the Detroit Tigers, who have been in the news as of yesterday after that big Miguel Cabrera contract, but we'll get to that. The first thing is Prince Fielder is gone, so I think a big impact of this team is Miguel Cabrera is going to go back to the first base. You saw last year he kind of struggled with those injuries. I think moving back to first base is going to be huge for him because you've got to keep him healthy. Prince Fielder, I think, kind of underperformed for this team. I never really thought he was an important piece to this winning a championship. So I think that was a good move. They added Ian Kinsler from that trade. Kinsler's going to be a very important piece for that offense. The biggest problem for the Tigers last year was their bullpen was horrendous. Their bullpen was horrible. They blew so many games for them. They added Jabba Chamberlain and Joe Nathan to the bullpen. I think that's going to help shore up that bullpen. I think that's going to be really big for this team. And I think the Tigers, I mean, look, there's not a lot of teams that can go Verlander, Scherzer, Anibal Sanchez. They just have such a dynamic core of pitching. The bullpen is shored up. We know what they can do on offense. Rob, I'm sure you're picking this team to win the division as I am.
Yeah, I have this team winning the division, Joe. My biggest concern, however, for this team is the shortstop position. Iglesias is out for the year. They've had this whole week. And you know what? That's a weak point. You know, Johnny Peralta, I liked him when he was with the Tigers. I thought he was good. Now he's with the Cardinals. But really good this year. I could see Miguel Cabrera trying to make another run for Triple Crown. I'm sorry. I think this year he's not going to be injury plagued, and I think he's going to put up high numbers. But awesome this year. Scherzer, Sanchez, Verlander. Where are you going to see a rotation like that? The concern is it's bad like he did last year, because last year towards the end, but he did get he's been hot in spring training, been hot. Nobody's been able to touch him, but I win the division. I think they're the best team no matter what. You could put them against any talent in that division and they have it.
Absolutely, I completely agree. The last thing in the Tigers is, as of yesterday, 30-year-old Miguel Cabrera signed an 8-year, $248 million extension with the Tigers, giving him a record $292 million over 10 years, and I don't know, Rob. You know, me and you, we're not the biggest fans of contracts like these. Absolutely, he's the hands-down best player in Major League Baseball right now. But when this contract ends, he's going to be in his 40s. And the thing that always comes into play with him is he hasn't been the healthiest guy. He hasn't taken care of his body. And you've got to ask, is this guy going to break down be more susceptible to breaking down than another player because of the way that he takes care of himself? And I think that's a valid question. But, Rob, what did you think of the whole extension? He still has 2 years remaining on his contract, so it's not like there was a rush to get this done.
Yeah. I mean, this is a good contract extension in a way. He's been phenomenal. You have to give somebody a high-paying contract like this. I don't like the amount of years, though, Joe. You know how mean you are with the Rodriguez contract with Cano. There's no should be making $25 million when they're not going to be hitting close to anywhere where they were in their early 30s. When they're in their prime, they're not going to be putting up those numbers late in those years. So in a way, this contract is good. You know what? I support him with this. Congratulations. But I don't like it whatsoever. I don't like the length of it.
Yeah. And just one thing I thought about, Rob, is think about Mike Trout. This kind of sets the standard for the best player, what their contract has to entail. When Mike Trout is eligible to get this kind of contract, what's it going to look like? It's going to be the biggest contract we've ever seen.
That contract is a $30 million contract. Especially with how young he is.
Yeah.
And Joe, the amount of money they just throw down at these players now, it's crazy. When you look back in the early 2000s, late 90s, nobody was making this kind of money. And it's just going to be sick how much money these players are going to be making now on.
I mean, at least in the Trout defense, at least you sign him like when he's young. Like, I like when Tampa Bay did it with Longoria. He was young. So you get Trout when he's young, and at least you're not getting a guy who's going to slowly diminish over time like Cano and Pujols. But that's that for the Tigers. We got some more teams in this division. The next one is the Kansas City Royals. They won 86 games last year. We told you on the show the last 2 semesters that we like this Royal team. There's a lot of young talent. It's a young team that continues to build and develop its talent. Losing Irvin Santana, I think, is going to be important because he was a really nice guy to be able to have after James Shields and Jeremy Guthrie. But on offense, Omar Infante, Eric Hosmer, Billy Butler, and Alex Gordon. That's a nice offensive core to build around, and I think that's really going to do well for them. They won 86 games. I could see them around that ballpark again this year. Again, it's a very young team. If they continue to develop the right way, I think the Royals are going to have a nice couple of years coming up ahead of them. But Rob, give us your take on the Royals.
Joe, with this team, I see a part downfall this year.
Downfall.
Yeah. That loss of Irvin Santana, he was one of their best people in the rotation, and now I feel that rotation's a little bit weaker. Even though you have James Shields, you have people like Jeremy Guthrie, but they're going to have to keep this team running and alive because that offense, we saw it last year. Billy Butler's a great player. He's great for fantasy. He's a great hitter, and he could help lead this Royals team. I do see a little downfall though this year.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, Irvin Santana, it's going to be a big loss. The next team in the division is the Cleveland Indians, and I love Terry Francona. He resurged this organization with the playoff appearance. The big thing I am concerned with this team is losing Ubaldo Jimenez and Scott Kazmir. They added John Axford, which is going to be good for their bullpen, but I think Ubaldo is really the one ace that they had, the one guy you could count in that rotation, and I just don't see that now, so I'm really worried with the pitching, but I love their offense. Michael Bourne, Nick Swisher, Jason Kipnis, Carlos Santana, Michael Brantley, and Asdrubal Cabrera. That's a really good offensive core to build around this team. I mean, I really like that, and I like their offense, but like I said, pitching, it scares me, and I think that this team, the way that things went for them last year, I think they kind of just came out of nowhere. I definitely see a little bit of a step back. Like I said, I have no question what they're going to do on offense, but in this division, especially with the Tigers, you're going to need pitching, and I just don't see that with the Indians. But what do you think?
I'm not sold on this team. I do like their offense, just as you said. They have one of the top offenses. Kipnis and Santana, they're great hitters, but their pitching is weak. Justin Mastron, I'm sorry, I'm not sold on him as a day one starting pitcher for you. He hasn't impressed me. He impressed me 1 year, and then towards the end of the year, he always struggles, and that's the biggest problem. They should have kept Jimenez. He was their ace for the last couple years, but they're a weak pitching staff right now, and that's what's going to kill them in this division.
Absolutely, we agree on those points. The next team is the White Sox, and look, there's not a lot to say about the White Sox. It's a team in rebuilding mode. There's not a lot of talent across the board. The big thing that you got to look out for them is they're going to have to rely on the development of rookies Jose Abreu and Matt Davidson. Abreu is the guy you've seen in the news. Everybody's talking about him. He's got to pan out for this team because there's not a lot of hope on this roster right now. But Abreu is the best thing. And look, they didn't win a lot of games last year. They're not going to win a lot of games this year. I think this is a team that's still far way off.
Yeah, this team, Joe, is just a rebuilding team right now. They're just putting all the blocks and pieces together. Paul Konerko, very sad last year, really struggled, and he's been one of the great players for the White Sox all these years, and it's just time rebuild. Jose Abreu has to be that guy who's coming into the major leagues, who's going to hit 30 home runs like he did in the Dominican League in 80 games. He has to be that guy. You know what? I 40 home runs in 162 games this year.
Wow. You like him a lot in fantasy too. We'll get to fantasy baseball, but you like him in fantasy baseball too. The last team in this division is the Minnesota Twins. Again, it's another team that lacks a lot of offensive talent. It's going to be a tough year. Add Ricky Nolasco and Phil Hughes. It shores up that bullpen a little bit, but those aren't like dynamic aces that you can count on. I like Phil Hughes, but Joe Mauer, he's the hands down best offensive player on this limited team. They won 66 games last year. I don't think you're going to see much of an improvement. They are what they are.
I'll give them 70 games this year.
70? Okay.
Yeah.
Four more wins.
The smartest thing they did this offseason, Joe, was move Joe Mauer from catcher to first base. Hands down, best thing you just did. You just saved his legs, and you're going to have a great hitter for the next couple years. He's a great 300 hitter. The pitching staff, Ricky Nolasco was a great pickup. Phil Hughes, a lot of people are telling me they're like Minnesota's ballpark is great for pitchers. So you know what? Phil Hughes might be able to improve at this ballpark. And that's one thing that really needs to be the big step up for them. Nolasco and Phil Hughes have to have big years in order for them to win.
Absolutely, and just building off that Joe Mauer point you made, I hate when I think it's such a good move when you move a catcher, especially with a talent as high as Joe Mauer, to first base because their bodies break down so much more heavy faster when they're behind the plate in the catcher role. So I really think this is a smart move because it's going to prolong his career in playing catcher with a guy of his caliber. I just don't like it for extended periods of time. But before we do the NL Central, we're going to go to our most popular segment, our fantasy baseball sleeper segment. I'm sure most of your drafts are going to be this weekend because the season is coming up right around the corner. The last ones we had was Hiroshi Iwakuma, Alan Craig, and Jed Lowry. Big good name players, but I think a lot of people are going to overlook those guys. You got to be a pretty good knowledgeable guy to know those guys. But the ones we have for today is the first one's Addison Reed. He's a relief pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Last year he was on a bad White Sox team with 40 saves and a 3.79 ERA. And I think the thing that you would be worried about with him is that that's a high ERA for a closer. But he's on a better team now. He's going to get better protection. I think that this guy is definitely somebody to look out for. Probably around 16-ish, but a lot of people aren't going to really recognize his name, so you could probably get this guy for a steal. My second one is Dominic Brown. I like Dominic Brown a lot. Left fielder for the Phillies. It's his 5th year coming up, but last year was his first full season, and it was very productive. He hit 272, 27 home runs, 83 RBIs, and I think a nice late steal, look around round 23. And like I said, that was his first season. He's still a young player. It was his first full season, so I think if he builds off that, which I think he will, he's gonna give you a nice round 23. That's a steal. Billy Butler is my last one. DH for the Kansas City Royals. The Royals aren't a very flashy team. They don't get a lot of attention and coverage, but Billy Butler is a very good, solid player. He's put together a very solid career so far. Last year he hit 289, 15 home runs, 82 RBIs. Could potentially see him around round 16, but I think Billy Butler, I think those three guys I just mentioned, I really can't see a lot of people really going out of their way to get them. I think that people are going to sleep on them. They're not going to really pay a lot of attention. Definitely look out for them. But Rob, give us your sleepers.
I have 3 people right here, Joe. Number 1, Ramos Ramirez, third baseman for the Milwaukee Brewers. Now, Ramos had a bad year last year. Only played in 92 games because of injury, and he only had 12 home runs and 49 RBIs. I think he will have a better year this year. This is a guy that usually hits about 25-plus home runs, will give you 90 to 100 RBIs, so he's one to look out at. Another person to look for is Grady Sizemore. Now, Sizemore, I know he's one on the unhealthy side, Joe, but he just got announced to be the starting center for the Red Sox. And you know what? If he's healthy, this guy is a great hitter, Joe. We've seen before he went down in '09 where the injury bug just started to kill him, this guy was getting stolen bases like crazy, putting up crazy RBIs. So he might be able to regain his strength and put up these numbers yet again. But last but not least, I have Josh Hamilton. Hamilton completely struggled with the Angels, and I'm coming to the point where I think anybody who goes to the Angels nowadays is just having hard careers. But I could see him homering 30 times and bring in at least 100 RBIs.
Solid, Big Shot Rob. Well, we hope everybody good luck in their drafts this weekend. Hopefully our picks, as they did last year, help you out as much. But the last thing for our baseball segment is previewing the NL Central, and the first team to go to is the St. Louis Cardinals. And look, they're still the team to beat in this division. They add Peter Barajas, and Johnny Peralta is the one I want to talk about because we all recognize that the Cardinals have such a good baseball culture, such a good organization, top to bottom. And Johnny Peralta, to me, just doesn't fit that culture. You know our thoughts on the steroid guys. We're not big fans of them, but I mean, Peralta had a great year last year when he got suspended. But I don't know, it's a weird fit for me. I just can't see it, but the pitching for the Cardinals is great. Adam Wainwright, Michael Wacha, and Shelby Miller. And the thing you really got to like if you're a Cardinals fan is Michael Wacha and Shelby Miller are young pitchers. And they pitched that well that last year. You're going to have these guys for a long time. And the Cardinals, they're going to be good for a long time with this talent. And then when you have a lineup of Matt Carpenter, Barajas, Matt Holliday, Alan Craig, Matt Adams, Yadier Molina, and Peralta, that's deadly. And it is a tough division, but I think the Cardinals got to be the team to beat until somebody proves otherwise.
Yeah, Joe, I think this team's going to win the division hands down. Big problem is, though, they had two key departures in David Freese going to the Angels this offseason in the trade, and then losing Carlos Beltran in free agency, and they were big parts of their offense. But I think their pitching will keep them alive, especially Mike Wacha coming into his sophomore season. Last year, Joe, we saw what he did in the playoffs, and he just embarrassed batters, old-timers, just striking them out one by one. And you know what? I think he's going to have a great sophomore year. I picked him up in my fantasy league, and I think Johnny Peralta was a great pickup for St. Louis. They haven't had a balanced shortstop, really. They always have a problem where they get a shortstop, he's injured the next year, and I think Peralta should be good for the next 4 years with them.
Good points, good points. And the next team is the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, if you're watching on the live stream, you can see I'm decked out in my Pittsburgh Pirates gear. Like some of our fans suggested, I should wear the team of the divisions we're previewing. So we're staying with that theme, and I've got the Willie Stargell throwback on. I love the Pittsburgh Pirates. Won 94 games last year. Finally made the playoffs. I just love Clint Hurdle. He's changed the dynamic of this organization. They've had losing ways for so long, and he's changing that. And the big thing, unfortunately, I think the Pirates are going to take a little step back this year, mainly because they lose A.J. Burnett and Edinson Vasquez, and those are big losses, especially A.J. Burnett. I mean, in the New York media, we make fun of him a lot, and he did struggle here, but he was really important for that bullpen for the Pirates. They really relied on him, and that's going to be a big loss. The next one is Francisco Liriano. He was lights out last year, 16-8, 3.2 ERA, 163 strikeouts. Can he replicate that season? I don't think he can. I mean, we've never seen him put up numbers like that before. I think last season was just one of those crazy things, and I don't think that he's going to have as good a year. But I like their offense. Starling Marte, Neil Walker, Andrew McCutchen, we all know how good he is, Pedro Alvarez, and Russell Martin. It's a good offensive core, but pitching is what worries me with this team. When you play the Cardinals and the Reds, those are two really tough teams with good pitching as well. So the Pirates have got their work cut out for them. But I wish them the best. I love the Pirates. But unfortunately, I think they take a little step back this year.
This year with the Pirates, Joe, I love their offense. Starling Marte, 35 stolen bases last year. I could see him possibly getting 50 this year. I think he's just that great of an outfielder. Just got signed to a 6-year, $35 million extension. Andrew McCutchen's coming back after the NL MVP. He's a great home run hitter. He gets on base, steals bases, great with RBIs. This Pittsburgh team, as you said, though, they are very weak in pitching. A.J. Burnett was a must-keep guy. We've seen him the past 2 years putting up great numbers, keeping that team intact. Francisco Liriano, just as you said, though, he did go 16-8. And I've seen him put up great numbers with the Twins. But then towards the end with the Twins, we always see him have bad years, good, bad year, good, bad year. And that's the problem. And Garrett Cole, he's their other guaranteed starter, but they're very weak on the rotation. And pitching is all that matters in the Central. I'm sorry. But in the NL Central, pitching is all that matters.
Hey, we say it all the time, folks. You got to have that. This division pitching matters so much, which brings me to the next team, the Cincinnati Reds. A very tough top three dogfight in this division. They won 90 games last year and lost to the Pirates in that one-game playoff. I think losing Shin-Soo Choo is going to be big for this team. But there's a lot of talent on this roster. Dusty Baker couldn't capitalize with it. How's Brian Price going to fare? I mean, I think it's an experiment. I don't think you know what's going to happen with Brian Price, and it's tough. I mean, Brandon Phillips, Joey Votto, Jay Bruce, and Ryan Ludwig, very good offensive core. We all know how good Joey Votto is. Brandon Phillips, one of the best defensive players in the Major League Baseball. And you've got Johnny Cueto, Matt Latos, and Homer Bailey. Three solid pitchers right there. The big thing is, how is Aroldis Chapman going to bounce back from that bad, just terrible play? But I think the Reds, it's a three-way dogfight. Cardinals, Pirates, Reds, one of these teams, but I think you got to go with the Cardinals. But the Reds, what do you think of the Reds?
I'm not really too sold on them, Joe. I really thought they were a really better team last year. I don't like the losing of Shin-Soo Choo because he's a great guy who gets on base no matter what. Gets on base, gets runs. Jay Bruce, Joey Votto, and Brandon Phillips always putting up great home run numbers, RBI numbers. But this Reds team, it's new head coaching, so you got to see, is it going to be a slight downfall without Dusty Baker? And then with pitching-wise, Johnny Cueto has to be healthy, Joe. Johnny Cueto's their ace no matter what. He's the ace at the end of the day, but he's always getting injured, and that's a problem. I don't also like the departure of Bronson Arroyo. He's a good veteran. You know what? He doesn't put up solid numbers, but he does keep his ERA at 3.3, and you know what? He's a great pitcher to have, a great guy in case you need for the playoffs, but I do see them taking a slight downfall.
Great analysis right there. I completely agree. The next two teams are the Brewers and the Cubs. Not going to spend too much time on them because there's not a lot to analyze there. The Brewers add Matt Garza and Francisco Rodriguez. Ryan Braun is obviously back after that distraction-filled offseason. We're not too big Ryan Braun fans on this show. They won 74 games last year. I think that sounds about right. It's just they're not better than the Cardinals. They're not better than the Pirates. They're not better than the Reds. I don't think they're going to be able to compete with these teams. I see them winning around that many games.
In order for this team to win, Joe, Ryan Braun has to put up higher numbers than what he had last year. That's one thing that has to get straight done. Him and Aramis Ramirez have to be the true leaders right now, put up these huge numbers. Matt Garza and Yovani Gallardo take over this team. If they want to get this team back to that playoff format, which they once were with Prince Fielder, they have to work their butts off right now, and that's the only way they're going to do it.
Absolutely. The final team is the Chicago Cubs, and it seems like they've been stuck in that rebuild mode forever. And again, like the only big names on this team are Starlin Castro and Jeff Samardzija. I like them, but the team is just really bad. 166 games last year. The big thing for me is Theo Epstein is 3 years into his rebuilding project. I think pretty soon we got to see the results. We've been waiting. We know the Cubs, he came in for the sole purpose of rebuilding this franchise, and I think maybe in the next year or two, we've got to see the results because I haven't seen them yet, and I'm really waiting to see what Theo Epstein's transition is going to make for this team.
Yeah, I can't deal with this Cubs team, Joe. I'm sorry. The Cubs will never be good again like they once were when they had Sammy Sosa and Moises Alou. It's just been terrible to watch them. Great ballpark, but just a terrible team that's put out there on the field. I know they're in rebuilding, but it comes a point where you guys start throwing out money for free agency. Almost getting Tanaka this free agency. He was a hot cause for the Cubs. But this team, they're just terrible. They're not winning it. It's going to take a while, Joe. It's going to take a long while to rebuild this team, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it. A lot of baseball that we just went over. When we come back, we're talking some NCAA athletes in the unionizing story, and we got some NBA to talk about. So stay with us, and we will be right back.